So the first attack power we're going to touch on here is Blades, Claws, Fangs. So if you're adjacent to someone and making a close attack, it has to be against a single target. So it would work in this case if Steampunk Penny was going to attack Hawkeye. And instead of dealing normal damage, so in this case we've got 3 damage, you're going to roll a d6. You do still need to hit, so let's roll that part first. So in this case we would need a 6. We do just get it, and we're going to roll for Blades. So instead of normal damage, which is 3, we're going to take a d6. Now in this case, 2 is less. So you would take the printed damage minus 1. In this case, it is 3 down to 2, so it's exactly the same. If we rolled a 1, for example, though, it would be 2 damage. Again, take their damage minus 1. However, you could roll up to, let's say, oh, there we go. So you can potentially deal up to 6 damage. You can do 5, 4. It can be a devastating power. One that can really change the tide of a game. Normally, smaller figures like 40, 50 points are going to have Blades, Claws, Fangs with like charge. So you can charge in and throw out a big attack, catching your opponent off guard. Next up, we've got Energy Explosion. So in this case, we're going to have Hawkeye the attacker. So let's say these two are stood here, and Hawkeye is going to make an Energy Explosion attack onto Penny. Energy Explosion reads range. Make a ranged attack and all other characters adjacent to an original target also become targets. Hit characters are dealt 2 damage instead of normal damage. So in this case, we've got 3 damage, but like I said, it goes to 2 instead of normal damage. So we're going to hit Penny. So we need a 12 on an 18. So that does hit. Now, poor old John Constantine is going to be a target as well, which does hit him as well. So it's going to be 2 damage to each instead of 1. Let's say John Constantine doesn't actually have any defense power, so he's going to take 2. And Penny does have invincible, so in this case wouldn't take any. If they had toughness, would just take the 1. You do still get your defense reducers, so it is important to note. Next up, we've got Pulse Wave, one of the most powerful attacks. It's not as good anymore. It's still pretty good though. Pulse Wave reads range 4. You're going to ignore characters that are adjacent. Other characters within range can't use powers or abilities for this action. Make a ranged attack targeting all other characters within range and line of fire, including at least 1 opposing character. So before you could potentially, it's a very niche case, but you could Pulse Wave your own stuff just to knock them off their top click if they had a better second one, for example, or if you're trying to rush them to a certain click. You can't do that anymore. You do need to target at least 1 opponent. You're going to use printed defense values for each targeted character. Each hit character is dealt 1 damage instead of normal damage. However, obviously because we're ignoring all powers, stuff like invincible in this case isn't going to save Penny. So let's say it's Hawkeye versus these two again. Hawkeye is going to use Pulse Wave. So we're going to count 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they are both going to be targeted. Even if Penny was like here, Constantine was like here, it's just going to explode out from Hawkeye. So as long as they're within 4 and not hidden behind a wall or anything, then they are going to get caught. So let's say Constantine in this case was on Hawkeye's team. You'd probably want to hide your team behind this wall and then Pulse Wave from here so you can still get all of their team. So let's make a roll. We're going to need a 6. That is going to be a hit. It's only going to be the 1 damage though, but it doesn't ignore the defense power. Pulse Wave is great if you can get like a clump of people. So let's say there was 2 here or 3. They would all take 1 damage, ignoring all powers. So you can't use things like super senses, prob, anything to get out of it. If you are caught in the range, then you are in some serious trouble. Let's say Daredevil had prob though, 2, 3, 4, and he was 5 squares away. Let's say he had 6 range. Daredevil could prob this attack because he isn't in the radius of 4, so his powers aren't turned off. He could still affect things. It's very niche things like that that might come up, and it's always good to leave your support figures slightly further back, so potentially you could be able to prob or other things if this happens. Next up, we've got Quake. So in this case, we're going to give Quake to, let's give it to John Constantine. Why not? Let's get a few more characters in here to see what we can do. Let's set it up like this. So John Constantine is against all 3 of these characters in this case, and we are going to use Quake. Now Quake says knockback. We also get to destroy any blocking, printed blocking terrain or terrain markers. So let's set it up like this. If John was to Quake here, we could choose to destroy this and these blocking pieces here. So for example, let's say Kate's on John's team. If we destroyed both of these pieces of blocking, Kate would then have line of fire to shoot into Hawkeye. So there's some tactical advantages to destroying the terrain. It's not always going to be what you want to do. Other than that, it generates knockback. So after each character is attacked, so let's put these back, they're going to be knocked back 3 squares. You get a roll with Constantine to attack. So let's give it a roll. In this case, he's rolled a 10 plus his 9 attack is going to hit everybody. Instead of regular damage though, everyone's going to take 2. You do get to use any reducers. So for example, if we had toughness here, we would only take 1. If we had invulnerability here, we would take none. You can still use stuff like super senses, so you can dodge out the way of it. 5 to 6, you can get out of the way. So in this scenario, let's say everyone's been hit. Nobody actually has any reducers here. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Take 2 clicks with Kate and Lucky. Now we would go 1, 2, 3, but we're actually going to hit into this blocking terrain. So we're going to go 1, 2 damage from the Quake, and then we're going to take an extra damage for hitting into this wall. Lucky is then going to go 1, 2, 3, finish here. It's to signify those big superhero moments where they crash into the ground, spreading out damage, knocking everyone back. And it's a very powerful ability, one that can be comboed with things like exploit weakness, giving penetrating damage. So in this scenario, if they all had toughness, because it's penetrating, they would still take 2 each. Next up, we've got super strength. So let's reset this one. Let's go like this. Again, we'll give Constantine this super strength. Basically, it's going to allow him to pick up terrain pieces other than things like water, smoke, debris, things like that. So he can't pick this up, for example, but he can pick up this side. Basically, it's going to give him extra damage when he attacks. So when he charges in, say he's got super strength as well, he can bring this along and whack Hawkeye with it. So it will do his regular damage, and then they'll all have different numbers on them. So in this case, it's +1. This one's +1, +2. So there's a few different options. That's a barrier. I didn't mean to pick that one up. There is also older items. So you have things like the heavies and lights. Not something really used anymore. Now we've got the much cooler terrain pieces, but it's things that you might see playing the game. So I did want to quickly show you them. Again, super strength is going to generate knockback. So 1, 2, 3. Again, take the damage plus the damage of your item, and then you're going to hit the wall. Most importantly, super strength just gives you knockback, so you don't have to be swinging with an item to generate that. Your character is just knocking stuff back. It's to show how powerful he is. Normally you find it on stuff like the Hulk and those big burly characters. Next up, we've got Incapacitate. So in this scenario, let's set something up here. So Constantine and Kate are against Hawkeye. They've both got a token. Hawkeye wants to set them back a turn, so instead of just dealing them both damage, he's going to choose to incapacitate. Now he has 3 targets, so he's going to choose to target both. We're then going to make a roll. That is actually going to hit both. 12 plus 17, yeah, perfect. So both characters, instead of damage, are going to be assigned an action token. Now what that does is, Hawkeye's still going to get one because he did make an attack. But what it does is, on their next turn, if they've not got anything like leadership, willpower, they're going to have to rest. So what it does is buy Hawkeye a turn where they can't do anything, pass back to Hawkeye. Hawkeye can then choose to attack both of them, or obviously you're going to have other characters on your team. Whilst Hawkeye is tokening them up, you can use other characters to deal some damage. Now, like we mentioned, he has got 3 targets, so potentially you could hit your whole team with it, which is absolutely devastating. It used to deal pushing damage, it doesn't anymore. There is no pushing damage. So that's a slight variation if you're playing some older rules. Just to bear in mind, that's not how it works anymore. It's still a good ability, more control than damage anymore, but it's still very useful, especially if you can use it. Some stuff has like free incapacitate, normally stuff like Spider-Man or Hawkeyes generally. So if you can use it on those precision characters with multiple targets, it can be quite deadly still. Next up, we've got Penetrating Psychic Blast, so let's reset again. Let's say Hawkeye is firing an arrow into Constantine. Penetrating Psychic Blast from Hawkeye is going to mean it penetrates any defense on John. So, listed defenses, toughness, invulnerability, impervious. It's going to penetrate any of those, ignoring them. So where you would normally get to roll 5, 6 with impervious to avoid some damage or reduce damage, because it's penetrated, you don't. It just goes straight through to defense. You don't reduce it by 2, or toughness, you don't reduce it by 1. So if we're dealing 3 damage here with penetrating, you're just going to take all 3 clicks. The other thing to note, if you're new, you do still get other stuff like super senses where you avoid attacks. You can still try to do that, as that's not a reduction of damage. You can still shape change and other things. So there are ways to get around penetrating, but it is a very powerful attack power. Next up, we've got Smoke Cloud. So I think John's probably the one to use this. Let's set it up again so I can explain some of it. You get minimum range 4. In this case, we're going to say John has range 6, just to do some interesting stuff and explain it a little better. You always get a minimum range 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the first one you place has to be in line of fire. So let's actually start John here. So John can't quite see Hawkeye. So we're going to go here. Now, because we've seen the first one, all the next ones have to do is link up and stay within range. So we could go here, could then go here. If we're counting 6 range, we could even keep going this way. Depending where you want to do it, but you probably want to end one under Hawkeye. Now, a character in your smoke cloud is going to have -1 attack. So potentially if we had Lucky paired up with Constantine, we could then throw Lucky into the smoke itself and trap their character in there, meaning they have no way of running out of it unless they want to take a roll and a gamble. Otherwise, they're attacking with -1 attack, and we're pretty happy in that case. Few things to note with Smoke Cloud. It doesn't affect your characters, so Lucky isn't going to get -1. If they're a double base, so let's say they were in both of these squares, they wouldn't get -1 for each square. It is 1 or more, so it's just going to be a -1 in general. Quite a powerful control power, one that you do normally find characters get for free. Normally not all 6 terrain markers, they'll normally get something like 3 Smoke Cloud with 2 to 4. Still very useful. Obviously you can throw it under yourself if, for example, let's say Constantine had stealth, so he could throw it here. He would now be in hindering terrain if he was stood here, so stealth would be active, you wouldn't be able to shoot him, so it's another good way to play defensively. It is a very defensive power in general, lowering their attack, making you stealthed if you need to, or just raising defense in general. It can be quite useful. Again, more of a control power, more of a support one than anything offensive. Next up, we've got Precision Strike, so let's set that one up. Makes sense given this one to Hawkeye. Precision Strike is normally on those marksman characters. Basically, it's always going to get to deal a damage. So if you've got Impervious and you roll your 5 to 6, let's say, you reduce the damage, but Precision is always going to mean you get pinged for 1. Again, let's say you're only dealing 2 damage. You attack someone with Invincible, which would normally be reduced by 2. In this case, we've got Precision, so it can't be reduced below 1. Again, we're going to get to deal a damage. You just slowly ping down the characters. It's those marksman characters that aren't overly powerful, things like Bullseye, again, Hawkeye. It's to represent them able to deal some damage without being too powerful. I think Precision Strike's in a pretty good place. It used to be very powerful. The other thing to note, it does also reduce super senses. So if Constantine had super senses, he would only succeed on a 6 instead of a 5 to 6. So it just makes it less likely they're able to avoid out and dodge out of the way, which makes sense for a marksman power. Next up, we've got Poison. So again, let's set up a scenario here. All 3 of these versus John. John is going to choose to use Poison. The things you need to check before you do: have you moved this turn? If you have, you can't poison. Have you been placed? Now, place is via things like TK. So if you've been Telekinesis to here, or you've been carried and dropped off, you won't be able to poison. However, if you've not moved for turn, you can choose to activate Poison for free. So everyone around you is dealt 1 damage. Everyone opposing, I should say, is dealt 1 damage. You do also get reducers, so if these all had toughness, it would do absolutely nothing. There is the rare case with stuff like Red Lanterns, and the odd case here and there where you do get penetrating poison, which is absolutely devastating. Just regular poison, are you going to deal 1? None of these characters actually have any reducers, so they're all going to take 1 click. It does also mean that is only a free action, so John could then choose to attack one of these. You can see if they're stuck here for a few turns, John can constantly just be dropping 1 damage to each of them whilst also swinging an attack of his own. It can be quite powerful. We have seen teams built around just poison. Obviously dealing 3 damage without having to roll, you're taking all of the luck of dice out of it. It is such a powerful ability and one of my favorite in Heroclix. Next up here, we've got Steel Energy. So let's say John's taken a hit or 2. He's then going to try and attack Hawkeye with Steel Energy. So he's going to make his roll as normal. Steel Energy is only close up, so if he was making a ranged attack, he wouldn't be able to use it. He has hit in this scenario, so he is going to deal his normal damage, so it is just 1 in this case. However, he did hit, so it means John is going to Steel Energy and heal 1. Now, this is a power you normally see with stuff like vampires or characters that sort of regen, so anything like a Wolverine is quite a popular one. It's added in healing to the character, so those really hard to put down characters, like I say, Wolverine, Sabretooth, you'll see it on all the vampires. If you combo it with something like Flurry, you could potentially heal 2 in a turn. There's a few really nice combinations of it, and it's quite a fun and thematic power. Now finally, for attack powers, we're going to touch on Telekinesis, so we're going to need some extra characters here. Let's say in this scenario, Lucky, Kate and Lucky have Telekinesis. I'll quickly read through it because this is a more interesting power than some of the others. So it says power, minimum range 4, choose a terrain marker or single base friendly character within range and line of fire. Place it into a square within range and line of fire that is also within 4 squares and line of fire from the original terrain marker character. This character can make a ranged terrain action as if it was holding terrain markers within range and line of fire. So that last part there, we'll just touch on that to get that out of the way. These terrain markers not only deal extra damage up close, they also have a throw distance and can deal some damage at range. So for example, if John was here and this was here, we could use Telekinesis because all the squares link up. John can see this. John can see the terrain piece. The terrain piece can be seen by the Telekinesis. Telekinesis can see John. So that would be thrown at John. You would make an attack as normal. And then if you succeed, deal that damage. But the most common use of Telekinesis is repositioning your team. So in this scenario, Old Man Logan needs to attack John, but he has no way of getting there. So Telekinesis, as long as we can both see the square, Kate and Lucky is going to activate Telekinesis. Count within 4, so 4 squares, as long as they both can see it, which they definitely can. Hawkeye is going to be moved via Telekinesis here. Now what this does is, it gives the token to Kate and Lucky, which is normally Telekinesis is more of a support power. So you're going to find it on those lower point characters, meaning now we can attack with our higher point character as they can now see John Constantine. Even though they've been TK'd, the action actually goes to the person using the TK, meaning they can be assigned an action to attack. It lets you reposition your team. It's a very powerful ability. One of the better support powers. A ton of use. Again, you can throw stuff if you've got no friendly characters around. Let's say Hawkeye wasn't here. You could just throw something at somebody. A ton of uses for it, a ton of variations. It's a versatile power and again, a very important one for support characters. That is the video on attack powers. Hopefully this has been some help. If you've got any comments, drop them down below. I'm more than happy to help. Obviously, we have got the defense and damage versions of this coming up. If you've not seen the speed one, you can jump back or click up here somewhere. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. We will have a overall, trying to decide what teams to use. I'm going to do a massive Heroclix game explaining all the rules as we play through it. So let me know if you want to see any particular teams down below. It could be X-Men versus Justice League. It could be Midnight Suns versus Justice League Dark. Anything you want to see, drop it in the comments below. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.